Welcome back to the Kickstarter Weekly, everyone, and if it's your first time here, then simply welcome. So these are the campaigns that I think are among the best campaigns out there, and the ones that I want to recommend to you, and make sure that you've taken a look at it before it passes you by. Now, I normally cover 1 week of completing games in each video. However, about 2 months ago, I was getting married and I went on my honeymoon, so I did a video that covered 2 weeks. Here I am again, about to go visit some relatives on the East Coast, long overdue. We haven't been back for about 5 years. So I, again, am going to record a video covering 2 weeks' time. That means that this video is going to be looking at campaigns that are completing their funding from September the 19th all the way through October 2nd. And, you know, as Murphy's Law would have it, it ended up being that these are 2 very, very busy weeks. So I have a gigantic video to share with you today in which I'm going to be covering 16 currently running campaigns. That's a lot. I'm assuming this video is probably going to end up around the 2-hour mark. So I am going to not dawdle too much so that we can get through all of the information and not waste anyone's time. I also, in these videos, take the opportunity to talk about any games that I've played since the last video, also games that I personally backed from the previous video, and then finally any games that I've acquired into my collection since the last video. I will be talking about all of those categories today. I have 3 played games. I have 2 games that I personally backed from last week's video, which covered 8 games. So I backed 2 of those 8 games. And then I've had 2 games arrive here since the last video. So I'll talk about those last. If you haven't, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. That's the best way to support this channel right now. These Kickstarter Weeklies are going to be continuing on a weekly basis, except for next week. So come back in 2 weeks and every week afterwards, and you'll get a new video highlighting the best, in my opinion, crowdfunding campaigns out there for board games. And I'm also in the process of completing an upstairs studio. And when that happens this fall, I'm going to be starting to produce some new kinds of content, things that I've done in the past, but on a higher level with better equipment. So this fall will see me relaunching the teach and review videos, and I'll be splitting the focus in those videos between new games that are brand new to my collection that I think people need to see a teach because maybe there just aren't any good ones out there, along with games that have been in my collection that are games that I'm really excited about and I want to teach them and do a full review for those. So I'll be splitting my time between both of those categories of games. I'll also be launching a Patreon later in the year, and that will be people's opportunity to help support me beyond liking and subscribing to the videos. And when that does get launched, you will help me determine what types of videos I'll be producing and which games I'll be teaching and reviewing. So that's something to look out for. And then finally, hopefully before the end of the year, I'll also be launching a Twitch channel in which I'll be playing a lot of games live streaming. Some of those will be campaign games, some of them will be solo games, and there'll also be the occasional multiplayer Euro game. All of that said, let's talk about the 3 games that I played during this period. The first of those games is called Kanban EV. It's designed by Vital Lacerda, and he happens to be probably my favorite designer. Kanban EV is also one of my 3 favorite of his games, the other 2 being Lisboa and On Mars. So I like the game a lot. I really like the game. The score will be incoming after I talk about it a little bit more, but it's going to have a high score. Like a lot of Vital's games, they are worker placement games, and if you hear him ever explain them, he'll be like, oh, it's very simple. You do 1 or 2 things on your turn. Very simple game. And that's true, technically, as it is with a lot of heavier games, especially heavier worker placement games. You may only be doing 1 of a few things on your turn. However, in these kinds of heavier games, a lot of times that can escalate. So whatever you do may chain into other actions. There may be a lot of small decisions to take into account as well. One of the things that I like about Kanban EV, it's a worker placement game, and it takes place in a car factory, so you're producing all kinds of cars, and there are 5 different departments that you're going to be dealing with. There is the design department, where you can go and pick up designs. You'll later use those to either purchase new cars or to implement upgrades on certain types of cars. There's also the logistics department, where you're going to be getting different kinds of car parts that you'll need to produce cars from the assembly line. Then there's the assembly line, where you're going to be using those car parts to push out cars. And there are a lot of little rules in this area. There's a whole chain of cars that get pushed out. So as you put a different car part on any one of the car lines to push a car out, you'll need to determine the path that it's going to follow. You may get some victory points depending on if you push a car out. You may get these little speech tokens that you get for various things around the game, but this is one of the places that you can get them if you push out a car of the matching color type, matching what currently is desired at that time. The speech tokens, you'll accumulate these through a variety of ways over the game, and then every once in a while, you'll have a meeting. Now, in the fourth area of the game, you can go to either purchase cars or to implement those upgrades. But to do that, you'll need plans. And you'll need cars over there that match the cars, any cars you're wanting to purchase. As you do this, as you purchase cars, you'll kind of advance a tracker in that area. And every once in a while, as the cars move, you're going to initiate a weekly meeting. The weekly meeting is places where players can score goals. So they'll have some goal cards showing at the beginning of the game. Players will also have some goal cards in their hands. And during a meeting, they'll have to reveal one of those cards in their hands for them or for other players to score points on as well. Also in the game is your boss, Sandra, and she's going to be going through all 5 of these departments. The 5th one is administration. I haven't mentioned that one yet, but in that area, you can go and you can do work in any of the other areas. There's also an interesting worker placement space where in most of the departments, there's 2 spaces. One of those spaces has more shifts, but the other space acts first. So this past week, I had this happen a couple times where I wanted to spend a lot of shifts someplace, and I went and I took the lower space, and then another player came in and took the space above me, so they got to go first, and then by the time it got to my turn, I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do there. So you do have an interesting choice to make whenever you go into a department. Do you want to go to the place with more shifts, or do you want to go to the place where you can actually take your actions first? Because if you do what I did, where you go to the lower space with more shifts, you may have a player come in ahead of you and make it impossible for you to do what you want to do or even take any actions at all. So administration is a place where you can go and then take actions in any one of the other departments. And sometimes this is beneficial because you can make that choice after other players have gone. So maybe one player will do something in a certain department that will invalidate what you wanted to do, but you're not obligated to take actions in that department. You can choose any one of the other departments as well. So as players are taking these actions and taking turns, Sandra is going to be showing up at various departments to evaluate them. And whoever is in last place on the certification track in that department may have to pay some penalties and points if they haven't done a minimum number of kind of actions or work in that department. As Sandra gets down to the bottom of all the departments, she will have an end of the week meeting, and that's another place that players can score points either for cars that they have or for upgraded plans that they have. Those points aren't worth very much in the beginning of the game, but they're worth quite a bit at the end of the game when you have, lots of cars and designs out. So the end game trigger for this game is once you have at least 2 of one of those things, the end of the week evaluations or the weekly meetings, once you have at least 2 of one of those things and 3 of the other, that will trigger the end game. I really, really like this game because it is heavy. Means there's lots of good thinking, lots of good choices to be made. And there are a lot of cool things going on in the game with goal cards and just various goals that you may set for yourself in terms of what you're trying to do and the way that those things chain into bonus actions and reward tiles and all these kinds of things. And if you pull this off really well, And I found that the order of operations best in this game, in general, not always the case, is to start at the bottom of the board, not in administration, but in design, and then kind of work your way up the board. And you will tend to get the things that you need for those other departments as you go up. But it's a tricky game, and it involves a lot of player interaction. There are a lot of things that can happen that can muddle with your plans. And this past week, I had a terrible game. I came in last place by a huge margin. Everything I tried to do got blocked. That's just part of the game, but that's why I like it so much. So there are going to be times where you will pull off an insane, maybe couple of turns where you'll have things that kind of chain into each other, and you'll be able to use what you do in one turn in the next turn. And it's a great feeling when you make those things all really work well together and you just rack up the points. But because of the player interaction and the way you can kind of block other players going certain places, there's also a downside that can be pretty brutal. But I love the game. I love Vital Lacerda. I love all of his designs. Kanban EV is one of my top 3, and as such, I am giving it a 10 out of 10. It remains there for me. It's one of the best Euros out there by one of the best Euro designers, in my opinion. I also played Origins First Builders this week. Now, Kanban EV is a game that I've played many times in the past. Origins First Builders was a first play for me. And this is designed by Adam Kopinski, who designed the Nemesis games. It is a Euro. It has to do with aliens who have come down on a planet and are trying to help guide evolution. So every player is going to have a faction. They're going to have one leader character that they can go to take actions around the board. And then they're going to have dice workers. And every time they use a dice worker, they will upgrade the dice worker to a higher pip. Eventually, when that die hits 6, when you go to certain spaces on the board, you'll be able to take both of the actions there instead of just one, as you normally would. And then when they come back to your player board after being a level 6 worker, they will become an advisor, and they will give your leader character additional powers based on color. There's a really nice combination of mechanics and a really nice flow in this game. And even just reading through the rulebook before I played it, I knew that this was going to be a game that I really liked, just based on the actions, based on the charting of game flow. And it didn't disappoint, but we did find out in our game that it seems like the game very much rewards a leader. So if you're doing well in the game early on, you may be rewarded even more, and the game may have runaway leaders. Now, I'm okay with that. I find that I often can get frustrated with games that have catch-up mechanics because it wants to keep everything on such a level playing field that there's almost no reward for the players that are playing well. And if everyone is kind of bottlenecked into the same very small scoring area for no real reason, even people who play really well and people who play really poorly in the same game are going to end up with a very tight scoring. I don't necessarily see that as advantageous. I think some players like that. They like to have that feeling of like, oh, I'm still in the game. I think they can feel a little defeated if they see, the leader just racing away from them and they realize that their ability to catch up and have any chance at winning the game is just flowing through their fingers like sand. So some people don't like that mechanic. I don't have a problem with it, and I'd rather have players be rewarded when they make a good move or do something well. I think I like it when points reflect that. So I don't have a problem if there is a runaway leader mechanic happening in Origins First Builders, but I need to play it a few more times to even see if that's true or not. It may just be something that happened in our game as a result of synchronicity and several things working together. And even though that did happen and one of the players in our game, in our 3-player game, just absolutely slaughtered the other 2 players, I still really enjoyed the game and I really want to play it again, which I think speaks a lot towards how good the game is. So it's a game that I hope to play more and I hope to talk about more as I have more experience with it. And it's something that if I continue to like it as much as I do, it's definitely going to be a prime candidate for a full teach and review down the line. For now, though, I'm going to rate this one an 8.5. And that brings us to the third and final played game of this period, which is Port Royal. The other 2 games I played once each during this period. Port Royal I played 9 times. Now, I talked about this in last week's video, and in last week's video, I just played the base game with Kristen. We didn't really love it too much. It's just kind of a race to 12 influence points, and it's a press your luck card drafting game, essentially. I think that press your luck is just not the mechanic that's at the forefront for either one of us. It's kind of like gambling, right? You're just pushing your luck as much as you can, and eventually things are going to blow up in your face. And so it's kind of how you manage that. And it's just a very simple game. You're just drafting cards in different ways, a couple different ways, but it's a very simple game, and I think the base game felt too thin for us, and mechanics just weren't rewarding to us. But this is the big box, and there are several things in this big box. One of them is a standalone game, which plays a little more simply, or you can take the cards from that game, mix them in with the base game cards, and just play the base game with a huge amount of cards. I haven't touched that one yet because I don't think I need the game to be more simplified, and I don't think just throwing more cards in with the base game is going to help make it better for us. However, I did play a bunch of games in another expansion that came with the box, which is contracts. Now, you can do this either competitively or cooperatively, but you're going to draw some random contracts depending on player count, and you will need to complete those contracts by the end of the game to win if you're playing cooperatively, or you'll try to just, if you're playing competitively, finish as many as you can before the other players do and score the most points for them. There's an event deck that you make, so whenever a player takes a turn, they draw from that event deck first, and then every card that they draw after that on their turn will come from the regular deck. But that, I'm calling it an event deck, it's just a deck that you're going to be taking a card from once at the start of each turn. That essentially starts a timer on the game. So however many cards are in that deck are going to determine the number of turns you'll have in that game. I like the contract part of it. I think that added an additional mechanic into the game that was much needed, and Kristen played it once with me as well in that mode, and I like it. I would definitely recommend playing it that way if you're going to play it, and if I choose to play it in the future, it will probably be mostly in that mode. So there's a fourth mode as well, and I played that one once, and that is sort of a story mode. There is a whole other deck of cards. There are 5 different chapters, and so you can play through one chapter at a time, or you can do kind of one long game and try to win at all 5 chapters in a row. I do like the story mode, but it is fiddly. It's really fiddly. There's a lot going on with a lot of different cards, and it just makes it problematic to get to the table, I think, for such a light game. It's just a lot of setup work for a game that's not really that complicated. But I do enjoy the story. I did enjoy the first chapter. It is going to be the same every time you play it in a lot of ways, certainly in terms of the story itself. So I think the story mode is something that I'll probably play through once, maybe solo, maybe play it once through with Kristen. But I think at the end of the day, even though I enjoy the solo mode probably the most, because of its non-variable nature, I don't think it's something that I'm going to come back to very much after I play through it once or twice, which then kind of turns me back to the contract mode as being the main way that I would play Port Royal. Now, I think this is a really easy game to teach people, and it's a quick game to play, so it's something that I might keep in my collection just for that, so that if I have some people over who are really not gamers and we're looking, for something to play, and or if we're looking for something to play quickly, it could fulfill that. But that is a very specific function that I'm kind of zeroing in on within this kind of big box. I mean, it's not big in size, but it has 4 different modes in it. So for me to kind of arrive at a place where I'm like, well, if I do keep it and I do play it, I'm just going to be playing one mode in this box. Then it becomes a question of, well, then should I be keeping the big box or should I just get rid of it? So I'm on the fence with it right now. I'm definitely going to play through the story mode a little bit, and I'm sure I'll talk about it a little bit more at that point, and I'll ultimately have to make a decision whether to keep it or not. I think I'll probably remove it from my collection. I just think with all the games that I have and wanting to consolidate space and keep things around that are really useful and have a high amount of utility in different situations, I think that the Port Royal Big Box may not fit the bill in the long run. But I did enjoy it more than I did in the past, and I did enjoy that contract mode. So I think for me, I'm going to give Port Royal Big Box a 6.5. I may change that rating in the future as I play it a little bit more, but I think that rating is much more solid than the rating that I gave it last week when I'd only played the very spare base game. I think at that point I gave it either a 5.0 or a 5.5. So it improves a little bit as far as I'm concerned using the contracts. It's at a 6.5 around there. I also like the story mode, probably about the same, but the story mode is limited, and I think it's going to run its course before too long. So finishing out this part of the video, I've got a 10.0 for Kanban EV, an 8.5 after a first play for Origin's first builders, and I seem to be settling in on a 6.5 as a final score for Port Royal Big Box, although I probably will come again in the future, talk about it a little bit more, and give it a final score. I don't know if it's a game that I do a teach and review for, but if that's something you'd want me to do, let me know. Otherwise, if I remove it from my collection, I'll no longer have it around to do a teach and review for. It's a simple enough game that may not need a teach, but there is a lot of fiddly things going on, so maybe it could use a teach from that perspective. So those are the 3 games that I played during this period, and now I'm going to keep things moving and start with the first of 16 campaigns that I'm going to be talking to you about today. The first of these is for a game called Almost Innocent. It had a minimum required funding goal of $25,000. They're currently at $72,000, which is about 3 times that minimum required funding goal. Almost Innocent is going to complete its funding on Tuesday, September the 20th. This is a game for 2 to 4 players in about 30 to 45 minutes. Complexity on the game is light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium-low. Now, Almost Innocent is a deduction game. Think something like Clue, where you've got like a graph system and you're using, 2 different sets of data to try to determine something. I don't know if you played those logic puzzles maybe when you were in school, when you were a kid, where you'd have, a set of things and another set of things, and then you'd kind of create a checklist. When you'd find something that matched that was specific, then you could cross other things off on the list. It's called a logic puzzle, or at least it was when I was taught it in school. But that is how you play Clue to maximize all of your findings and make sure that you can get to a correct answer and not have information conflict with itself. This game is kind of like that. So players are going to have player screens. They're going to be working, each player on their own little pad of information. It's kind of cute, animal themed, and it's got a campaign. So think of it as a Clue-like deduction game with cute animals that has a campaign if you want to play it in the campaign mode. It's designed by Philippe Attali, with art by Satoshi Matsuura, who worked on a game called Hidden Leaders, and it's being published by Colossal Games, who are probably best known for Mezzo, Omen, A Reign of War, and Western Legends. Now, being a simpler game, it's also a simple campaign. There are 2 different pledge levels that you may want to back. The first pledge is for $30. It's called Almost Innocent, and that will get you the base game with any stretch goals. For $40, you can pledge at the Deluxe pledge level. So that upgrade to Deluxe is going to get you 2 things: wooden investigation tokens instead of the cardboard ones that come in the standard version of the game, and then dry erase boards and markers to replace the pads and pencils in the standard edition of the game. In the continental US, either pledge is going to be estimated at $12 in shipping, and Colossal Games is planning on delivering Almost Innocent in May of 2023. Our second campaign is called Kinfire Chronicles Night's Fall. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $50,000. They're currently at $232,000, which is about 4.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Kinfire Chronicles is also going to complete its funding on Tuesday, September the 20th. This is a game for 1 to 4 players that plays in about 45 to 60 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at high, because it's a new publishing entity, a new publisher, and they're doing a Kickstarter for the first time, even though some of the people involved have been around the industry for a while. it is a new publisher. Now, this is being described as a cooperative, quest-based RPG board game, and it's going to use a chip pull system, which is like Arkham Horror the card game, which means you're going to have a bag of tokens, and then when you do things, you'll pull tokens from the bag to determine your success or failure in some way. I think the best way that we can succinctly describe this one is simply as a cooperative game. Now, it's been designed by Daryl Hardy, who's previously worked on Maelstrom, Runebound, and Runebound 2nd Edition, Adela Kapuscinska, Brandon Perdue, who's worked on X-Men Mutant Insurrection, and Kevin Wilson, who's worked on Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, Cosmic Encounter, Descent, Journeys in the Dark 2nd Edition, Fury of Dracula 3rd/4th Edition, and Sid Meier's Civilization the board game. There are 4 different credited artists on the game, including Katarzyna Bekus, Sandra Kluwinska, Veronica Kozira, and Katarzyna Radysiak. And finally, the game is being published by Incredible Dream Studios, and this is their first published game and their first Kickstarter. So for $99, you can pledge Kinfire, which will get you the base game and any stretch goals. For $175, that's a pretty big jump, you can pledge the Premium Collection. That's going to give you an upgrade kit, premium stretch goals, and foreteller audio narration. Now, the upgrade kit is going to have things like 32 acrylic standees to replace the cardboard standees from the standard version of the game, 6 neoprene player mats, 150 custom sleeves, and 50 metal fate tokens. So that is the high pledge for this campaign. And if you want some of those things, but not all of those extras, you can also pledge them as add-ons. $50 will get you the enemy upgrade, which is all of those acrylic standees. $30 will get you the 6 neoprene player mats. $20 will get you those metal fate tokens. $40 will get you 100 custom sleeves, and $15 will get you the foreteller audio narration. So you can always pledge for any combination of those things if you don't want all of them that are included in that premium collection. However, if you were to add up those subtotals, they all add up to $154, but the jump from one pledge to the other pledge is about $75. So you're essentially getting everything for half what you would get normal price as an add-on. You're getting a 50% savings by just getting that $175 premium collection price and all of that stuff that comes with it. There are a couple other things that you can add on that aren't any pledge at all. There is a $20 digital PDF map pack. So in addition to having, the maps on the table, the physical game, you could have it on an iPad or something like that. So you could be looking at the maps digitally. Also for $20, you can add on a blank quest folio. It's a 4-pack, so that will give you the ability to create 4 of your own quests. Both of those things are only available as add-ons. They're not in either of the 2 pledges. Shipping in the continental US has been estimated at $34 or $43, depending on your pledge level. And Incredible Dream Studios is planning on fulfilling this campaign in August of 2023. From there, we move to Dwar7s Legendary Forest. This campaign had a minimum required funding goal of $10,000. They're currently at $56,000, which is about 5.5 times that minimum required funding goal. This one's going to complete its funding on Wednesday, September 21st. It's a game for 2 to 4 players that plays in about 45 to 80 minutes. They're very specific about that range, not 90 minutes, but 80 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium low. Now, this is an expansion for Dwarves Spring, and that game is an engine building game. It's a worker placement game, most of all. But there have been some expansions that were available for it previously. They're no longer going to be publishing those expansions. They're collecting them all into this package, and this is what will be offered in the future. It has 160 new cards. It has a lot of miniatures that you wouldn't have in the base game, but you would have if you have some of these other expansions that have been previously available. This is sort of a new packaging for all of the expansions for Dwarves Spring. The game is designed by Louis Brouet, who's worked on Dwarves Fall, Dwarves Winter, and Night of 100 Yokai. Art is by Louis Brouet, and as an artist, he's worked on Dwarves Fall, Nomopolis, and Night of 100 Yokai. And the game is being published by Vesuvius Media, which is Louis Brouet's company, but they've published some other games as well, so the games that they are best known for are Catapult Feud, Dwarves Fall, and Pacific Rails Inc. Now, for $40, you can pledge the Returning Backers Pledge. This is for people who already have the base game and the other expansions, but they kind of want to upgrade to this version. So it's going to give them the legendary box that everything is going to fit in, as well as a neoprene game mat, a PDF comic, and stretch goals. For $60, you can pledge Dwarves Spring. That would be if you don't have the base game. So you would essentially be getting the base game through this campaign. That pledge level would give you Dwarves Spring, the base game, as well as that PDF comic and the stretch goals of the campaign. For $60, you can pledge the Legendary Forest expansion. That's going to give you the new Legendary Forest expansion, all of the stuff, which is different than the first pledge, because that pledge is just the empty box. So in that $40 pledge for returning backers, the idea is that you already have the content, you're just getting the box and the comic and the stretch goals. This pledge will actually give you the box filled with the content, as well as the comic and the stretch goals. Now for $120, you can pledge the Dwarf King bundle, and that will combine everything. So you'll get the new expansion box with all of this stuff and the base game and the webcomic and the stretch goals. And the expansions that are covered by this are all of the previous expansions for Dwarves Spring, which is the Elves Uprising expansion, the Enchanted Forest expansion, and the Legendary Conversion Pack. All that stuff was offered previously. It's going to include a fourth thing, though, and that is something that's been kind of attributed in the past more toward Dwarves Fall, but it can be used in any Dwarves game. So that is also going to be offered and packaged with this, and that is Dwarves Forge. It is a Dwarves expansion that can be used in any of their games. So you'll be getting all four of those things in this new Legendary Forest expansion. If you want not everything, but some of those additional things, you can kind of pick and choose in the add-ons. For $20, you can add on the neoprene game mat, $40 for deluxe wooden tokens, additional copies of the Dwarves Spring base game for $60. $60 will also get you additional copies of the new Legendary Forest expansion that packages those four other expansions into one. $10 will get you the Dwarves comic, the PDF comic, although you're getting that with any pledge level, so you probably don't need extra copies of that unless you're gifting it to someone or you're getting multiple copies of the game. Also for $10, you can add on the BB Hopper promo monster and cards. Shipping in the continental US is being estimated at $18 and $22, so it's $22 for that Dwarf King bundle, $18 for everything else. And finally, Vesuvius Media is planning on delivering this campaign in May of 2023. That brings us to Dune, War of Arrakis. This is the latest CMON game, and this is a very short campaign. It's like 8 days. It just launched yesterday, so the information is kind of thin that I have for this. The reason is that CMON generally runs their campaigns, they'll launch it, and they'll have a base pledge for the base box, and that's it. And then over the course of that week, they will add in so many expansions, just a ridiculous number of expansions and stretch goals, extras and things. And over that course, that week, the course of that campaign, they'll create more pledges too that package those expansions together. Usually about 24 hours before the campaign completes, that's when they'll finally post their all-in pledge. I don't really like CMON campaigns because I don't like the way that they're run. I don't think that this is good business operating procedure. I think it just feeds FOMO. And if you're a backer, you're going to be sitting there watching the campaign and thinking like, oh, I can pledge this game for $110 because that's the original, base game pledge. But as the campaign proceeds and all these expansions come out and they package more pledges together, you may find yourself at the end of that pledging $500 once you get to the all-in pledge plus shipping. So that's just something I want you guys to be aware of as you're watching this. I'm going to give you as much information on Dune War for Arrakis as is up right now when I'm filming this on Thursday. But I know that as people find this video over the next week, as it's posted, as that campaign completes, there's going to be many more pledge levels that are added. So just be aware, if this is something that is appealing to you, then you need to go down into the description section. I always have links for all of the campaigns that I'm talking about. You can just click on that link, it'll pop you right to the campaign, and you'll be able to see what's been added since I made this video and what additional pledges there are, because I guarantee there will be more pledges, more expensive pledges, and all-ins, and it probably won't be completed until 48 hours before the campaign finishes max. So I just wanted to let you know that up front. Anyway, Dune War for Arrakis had a minimum required funding goal of $400,000. They're currently at $480,000, which is almost 5 times that minimum required funding goal. This one's going to complete its funding on Thursday, September 2nd. It's a game for 2 to 4 players, plays in about 2 hours. Complexity appears to be medium heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at low. Even though CMON has these insanely big, rich campaigns, they do deliver, and they have products with a pretty good quality. They're just gigantic, enormous, expensive pledges in games. But they do deliver, and they do deliver a good quality product. For the sake of accuracy, I'm just going to call this one a dudes on a map game, because you are going to have dudes. They're going to be on a map. There's going to be combat. There's cards and things like that. I'm not sure this time if this one is a full 4X game. Sometimes dudes on a map games are 4X games, where you're exploring, expanding, exploiting, and exterminating. Some dudes on a map games have all 4 of those things. Some of them have 2 or 3. Sometimes it just kind of boils down to combat and area majority. It's kind of an area majority game. So I'm not sure at this point in time if this is going to just be determined by area majority and influence and card play and things like that, or if it will have all 4 X's. So we're just going to go ahead and call it a dudes on a map game. And I should also add that it is obviously a Dune themed game. Now there's a second Dune movie coming. I think there's going to be more beyond that. So I think this is going to be an IP that stays out there for a while, which is probably why they're committing to this, because it's not something that's going to go away from the public anytime soon. There's going to be more movies, going to make millions, perhaps billions of dollars. So the IP is going to continue to be out there. And secondly, it's designed by the guys who've worked on a lot of Lord of the Rings stuff, like the War of the Rings games. So it's co-designed by Marco Maggi, who worked on the Battle of the Five Armies, War of the Ring, and War of the Ring 2nd Edition, as well as Francesco Nepetalo, who worked on all 3 of those games as well. The art on this is by Henning Ludvigsen, who's worked on a ton of games, including Android Netrunner, Arkham Horror the card game, Blood Rage, Star Wars Imperial Assault, and Star Wars X-Wing Miniatures game. Finally, it's being published by CMON. They're probably best known for Arcadia Quest, Blood Rage, Cthulhu Death May Die, Rising Sun, and Zombicide Black Plague. Now, at this point in time, again, the pledges are very simple, but it's not going to stay this way as the campaign proceeds. Right now, if you go and look at the page, there's one pledge that you can pledge. It is $110. It's called the Harvester Pledge. That's going to include the core box and the stretch goals. And as is often the case, CMON has a ton of stretch goals. So even that core box with the stretch goals is going to be huge. In fact, the estimated shipping for this project is $58. That's for that pledge. So as they add in more pledges, shipping may go up for some of those other pledges. This is not going to be a cheap game, and CMON is trying to front load that sticker shock so that people won't be upset or not knowing how expensive the shipping is going to be, after they've already committed to the game months down the line when they're doing the pledge manager and paying for shipping. So shipping on this one is going to be very expensive. It's $58, continental US, just for the base pledge with the core box and the stretch goals. You'll have to keep looking as more and more expansions come out over the next week and more pledges go up, if that shipping price is going to be for everything, if it's just kind of an estimate for everything, or if the bigger pledge levels will have increased shipping estimates. They may. And last but not least, CMON is planning on delivering Dune War for Arrakis in October of 2023, so in about a year's time. From there, we're going over to Backerkit for Fugitive, 2nd Edition, and Run. This project had a minimum required funding goal of $25,000. They're currently at about $114,000, which is about 4.5 times that minimum required funding goal. This one's also going to complete its funding on Thursday, September the 22nd. There's 2 games involved in this, Fugitive 2nd Edition and Run. Run is a new game. Fugitive is a game that's existed before, but they're doing a new version of it, and I believe they're upgrading it with shift cards, the kind of cards that you've seen in Mind Management, if you've played that. Both of these are 2-player games, so they're kind of head-to-head, tug-of-war games where one player is playing a direct confrontation game against the other player. Fugitive 2nd Edition is estimated to take about 5 to 20 minutes, and Run is estimated to take about 10 to 30 minutes. Both games have a complexity of light, and we are going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium-low. Now, if we have to kind of sum up both games in one thing, I think it's card game. We're looking at card games here. But it's also important to note that both of these card games are specifically for 2 players, so they're kind of 1v1 card games, and they're also card games that focus on deduction. So the things that you're doing with the cards and the way that you play is going to be centered around deduction and trying to figure out things about your enemy. Run has been designed by Moritz Dressler. He's probably best known for Hungry Hamsters and a couple of German games, Das Perfect Wort and Spooksstaben. Tim Fowers is the designer of Fugitive 2nd Edition. He's also designed games like Burgle Bros, Hardback, and Paperback. Ryan Goldsberry is the artist for both games. He works with Tim Fowers a lot and with Tim Fowers' company, Fowers Games, a lot. So he has provided art for all of Tim Fowers' games, including Burgle Bros, Hardback, and Paperback. And of course, Fowers Games publishes all of Tim Fowers' games, so they're also best known for Burgle Bros, Hardback, and Paperback. This is rather a simple campaign, so for $25 you can pledge Fugitive 2nd Edition, for $33 you can pledge Run, and for $50 you can pledge the Fugitive 2nd Edition plus Run bundle. A couple of add-ons that you can add on if you'd like. For $4 you can add on 2 bonus maps for Run. They're double-sided, so you essentially have 2 double-sided boards. The purpose of this is that when you're playing the game, players are going to be using boards, similar boards. So this will give you more variability, more choices for other player boards that you could use. Then for $2, you could buy a bonus shift card as an add-on for use in Fugitive. Shipping in the continental US is being estimated at $9, $11, and $13, so it's just 1 for each pledge. So if you're just getting Fugitive, it's $9. If you're getting Run, which is a little bit more expensive, it's $11. And if you're getting the bundle, that's $13. Also, there's 2 different delivery periods here. So if you're only pledging Fugitive, it's hopefully going to come to you in December of 2022. But if you're pledging for Run or you're pledging for the bundle with Run, then you're going to be looking at a delivery of March of 2023, unless you decide to split the shipping and have them each delivered separately. But I think we're going to look at March 2023 as the delivery date overall for this project. We're going to leave Backerkit and go over to Gamefound for our next campaign. And this is for Space Explorers Age of Ambition and Prehistories Evolutions. These are 2 different expansions, 1 for each of the base games. Now, this project had a minimum required funding goal of $5,000. They're currently at $15,000, which is about 3 times that minimum required funding goal. So it's not a hugely ambitious funding goal, but they're funded, they're doing well, they're going to be able to produce this project. This one is also going to complete its funding on Thursday, September the 22nd. Now, Space Explorers plays 1 to 4 players in about 20 to 40 minutes, whereas Prehistories plays 2 to 5 players in about 35 minutes. Prehistories falls into the light complexity range, whereas Space Explorers is more medium light. And we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign overall at medium-low. Space Explorers, in its essence, is an open drafting and set collection game. And this new expansion, that's what it is, Age of Ambition, is going to have 7 new modules that you can put into Space Explorers. Prehistories, on the other hand, is more focused on hand management and tile placement. And the new Evolutions expansion for that one is going to have 3 modules that you can put into the game how you'd like. Now, as far as the creators go, there are 2 different designers on Prehistories Evolutions. Alexander Emmerich has previously worked on Boom, Bang, Gold, and Troll and Dragon. And Benoit Turpin is the designer between one of my favorite roll and write series, Welcome To. So he's best known for Welcome To, Welcome to the Moon, and Welcome to New Las Vegas. Yuri Zaraveljov is the designer behind the new Space Explorers expansion, Age of Ambition. He also designed the original game. He's probably best known for the Golden Sails and Viceroy. Camille Chaucy is the artist for the new Prehistories expansion, Evolutions. She's worked on Micropolis, Pyramids, and Via Magica. And Alexei Kot is the artist for the base game of Space Explorers. It's not credited right now who the artist is for the new expansion, but it could be the same artist. I'm hoping that it's the same artist, but as of yet, I don't know for sure. It is currently uncredited. Finally, 25th Century Games, the publisher, is best known for Kingswood, Ra, and Velamino. Now, there are a lot of different pledge levels for this campaign because they're giving you ways that you can get just the new expansion or the new expansion and a base game or different combinations of the different games and their expansions. So we do have a few pledges to go over here. For $20, you can get Prehistory's new stuff. That's going to be the new expansion, Evolutions. For $30, you can pledge Space Explorers new stuff. That's going to be the new expansion, Age of Ambition. For $50, you can pledge Time Travel new stuff. Time Travel is essentially their phrasing for the 2 things together. So that will get you the 2 new expansions, the one for Prehistories and the one for Space Explorers. No base games though, so if you're pledging this pledge, you want to make sure that you already have both base games. For $40, you can pledge Prehistories All-In. That's going to give you the base game for Prehistories and the new expansion. For $75, you can pledge the Space Explorers All-In. That will give you the base game for Space Explorers and the new Age of Ambition expansion. Then they have 2 different pledge levels for $85. One's called Time Travel All-In minus Space Explorers base game. So for that one, you'd be getting Prehistories, the new Prehistories expansion, and the new Space Explorers expansion, but no base game for Space Explorers. So the idea here is you already have the Space Explorers base game, and you want to get the new expansion, and you want to get everything for Prehistories. And then they have another similar pledge that does the same thing for Prehistories. So that's also $85, and it's called Time Travel All-In minus Prehistories base game. And that one's going to get you Space Explorers, the base game, plus the new expansion, plus the Prehistories Evolutions expansion. So that one assumes that you already have the Prehistories base game, you want the expansion, and then you also want everything Space Explorers. Now, if you don't have either game and you want both of the base games and both of the expansions, you're going to want to pledge at the $100 level. It's called Time Travel All-In Everything. It's going to get you all 4 games, so 2 base games and the 2 expansions. Now, if you want to pick and choose in the add-ons, $20 will get you Prehistories, that's the base game. $20 will also get you Space Explorers, that's the base game. $20 will get you Prehistories Evolutions, that's the new expansion. And you can add on for $30, so this is the only one that's not $20 as an add-on. For $30, you can add on Space Explorers Age of Ambition expansion as an add-on. There's also some pretty cool patches if you like to have patches that you can put on your clothing. For $5, you can get the Space Explorers Mission Patch 1, and for $5, you can get the Space Explorers Mission Patch 2. For $10, you can add on the Space Explorers Playmat. For $15, you can add on the Space Explorers Wooden Tiles. So that is a wooden tile set that will replace the cardboard tiles in the base game. And if you already have that, if you already have the base game with the wooden tiles, then you're probably going to want wooden tiles for the expansion. So for $5, you can pledge the Space Explorers Age of Ambition Wooden Tile Update. That will give you wooden tiles for Age of Ambition so that your tiles for the new expansion will match the wooden tiles for the base game. Shipping in the continental US is being estimated at $12, $15, $18, $20, and $25. So if you're pledging for either of the first 2 pledges for just one expansion, that's $12 in estimated shipping. If you are just pledging for the Prehistories base game, That's $15 in estimated shipping. If you're pledging for either the Space Explorers All-In or the Time Travel New Stuff, so both new expansions, that's where you're looking at the $18 in estimated shipping. And then the $20 in estimated shipping is for either of those $85 pledges, the one where you're getting both expansions and just one base game. And then $25 in estimated shipping is for that $100 pledge where you're pledging for everything. Finally, 25th Century Games is planning on delivering this project in April of 2023. Now from there, we leave Gamefound, we go back to Kickstarter for a game called Weimar, The Fight for Democracy. This one has a minimum required funding goal of $20,000. They're currently at $91,000, which is about 4.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Weimar is going to complete its funding on Friday, September the 23rd. This is a game for 4 players, just 4 players. So it is a hardline player count there. You can't play it at any other player counts. However, they are including a solo scenario, kind of like a tutorial scenario. So if you're trying to learn the game by yourself, you can play that scenario as a solo mode kind of. But it's not really a full game. It's just an intro tutorial. It's going to be the same thing every time. And other than that, that one little solo scenario, it is a 4-player game with a very specific player count. Not 2, not 3, not 5, not 6. It's a 4-player game. It also takes 3 to 6 hours to play. So it is a long game. It's also a heavy game, so it's very complicated. And I think for that reason, the backers behind this may be fewer. There are a lot of very specific requirements here. Exactly 4 players, a 3 to 6 hour heavy game. And we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at high. Now, this game takes place in 1918 Germany. It is a war game. It's very card driven, and it's all about trying to preserve German democracy. It's designed by Matthias Kramer, who's worked on a lot of great games, including Glenmore, Glenmore 2 Chronicles, Lancaster, Rococo, and Watergate, which is a very small 1v1 war game styled game, but kind of in the vein of like 1960, The Making of the President, or Black Orchestra. It's that kind of war game. But I think anyone who's played that and likes that should have good feelings going into this campaign. However, again, 4 players, 3 to 6 hours, heavy complexity. Art on the game is by Christian Opperer, who's worked on Cloud Age, Ohanami, and Neom. And the game's being published by Skellig Games, who has published such games as Ambrosia, Harmonia, and Sagani. Now, this is a very simple campaign. There's 1 pledge for this, no extras, no add-ons. For $124, you can pledge Weimar. One thing to note, though, there are, I think, 3 different versions, and they're language specific. So just make sure that you're pledging the version that you want. I think there's English, German, maybe one other, but make sure you're pledging the right language. And then also, worldwide shipping is free. So they've already baked the shipping into the pledge price, certainly in the continental US. So that pledge of $124, that's everything that includes the shipping. And finally, Skellig Games is planning on delivering Weimar, The Fight for Democracy in June of 2023. Now, we are halfway through this video. These are completing their funding the following week because this video is covering 2 weeks. So as I'm talking to you about the numbers on the games, how much they've funded, that number, that's their multiplier. These games should have lower numbers because they have a week less that they've been out. They're going to have a week more that they're going to run. And if you see any numbers within this group of games that's really impressive, then it's even more impressive because it's happening with still another week to go on the campaign versus the first batch of games. The first of the second batch is over on Gamefound. It's called KeyForge, Winds of Exchange. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $50,000. They're currently at $537,000, which is 11 times that minimum required funding goal. It's a lot. KeyForge is going to complete its funding on Monday, September the 26th. This is a game for 2 players that plays in about 15 to 45 minutes. Complexity on the game is light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at high because it's by a new publishing entity. It's called Ghost Galaxy. It's from one of the old heads of Fantasy Flight Games. I think it may actually be under their umbrella, but it's still its own entity, its own separate entity. So we're going to take it as such. And in that sense, it's the first time that they're publishing a game, the first time they're putting out a Kickstarter. So we are resetting their risk to high. Now, KeyForge is a card game that has collectible components. What really made KeyForge different is that they used an algorithm to design all the decks. So they have a certain number of cards in KeyForge. I think right now it's 350 different cards. And then they kind of choose which cards to pack together in any of the decks by using this algorithm. They lost the algorithm. They don't have it anymore. So if you have the old KeyForge game, you can still play it. You can still play against other people, but they can no longer publish it. They need to recreate the algorithm, which is part of what the funding for this campaign is doing. It's giving them the money to rebuild that algorithm, and then they're going to start publishing the game under this new publishing entity, Ghost Galaxy. So it's essentially kind of a reboot of the game. Now, KeyForge is designed by Richard Garfield, who's worked on a lot of very different games, including Android Netrunner, Bunny Kingdom, King of Tokyo Dark Edition, and he's probably best known for creating Magic the Gathering. Huge game, right? Everybody's heard of Magic the Gathering. The artists, unfortunately, in this version are not currently credited. So if I go over and I look at Board Game Geek, there's no artist listed there. There's no artist on their page. I don't know if they're using old art. Even if they are, they still need to credit the artist, but I don't know where they're pulling their art from or what the situation is with that. I generally don't like that. I want the artists to be credited, and sometimes I won't even cover the game if the artists aren't credited. But this is a huge game. It's well known, and I'm hoping that as time goes by, they'll start to get that artist information up, but it's not there right now. And then finally, this game is being published by Ghost Galaxy, which is a new entity, a new publisher, and an umbrella, I believe, under Fantasy Flight Games. There are a lot of pledge levels for this one. They're trying to give you a lot of different options, and they want to give you options with a lot of KeyForge decks. Some of these pledges have a lot of decks included. Let's start at the beginning and move our way forward. So the first pledge level is for $50. It's called Novice of the Crucible. It's going to get you a new starter set, a new 2-player starter set, so that you'll have the components to be able to play the game. If you have a previous version of the game, you may already have those components, but if you don't have any KeyForge in your collection to your name, you may need a 2-player starter set so that you can play it. You'll get that in this pledge level, and you'll also get 2 decks for Winds of Exchange, 2 additional decks. So there are 2 decks built in to the starter set, and then you'll get 2 additional decks, so 4 decks total. If you pledge for $65, which is the Seeker of Decks pledge level, you will get a total of 6 decks, but you're not getting any starter set, so you're just getting 6 decks, that's it. For $75, you can pledge Hunter of Shards. That will still give you 6 decks, but then you'll also get a play mat with it. For $150, you can pledge Reader of Amber. That pledge level is going to give you 12 decks, 2 play mats, 1 personalized deck, and 1 personalized playmat. If you go up to the $420 Breaker of Chains pledge level, it's getting so expensive, you're gonna get 36 different Winds of Exchange decks. You'll also get 2 regular playmats, 3 personalized decks, and 3 personalized playmats, plus a Niffle Ape figure, an Officer Moon figure, and a Fuzzy Gruen plushie. It's a plush stuffed animal. If you pledge even higher than that, at the $750 Turner of Keys pledge level, because you can't get enough KeyForge in your life, you're going to take that previous pledge level, but instead of getting 36 decks, you're going to get 72. You're still going to get the 2 player mats, the 3 personalized decks, and the 3 personal player mats. You're still going to get that Niffle Ape figure. You're going to get the Officer Moon figure. You're going to get that Fuzzy Gruen plushie. But you're also going to get a Dusk Runner figure, so an additional figure, and the collector set, the Winds of Exchange collector set. Now, as I mentioned, I think at the top, this is a 350 card set that goes into the decks in KeyForge. So when you go and get a deck, you're going to be getting some combination of those cards that hopefully, based on the algorithm, will work well together. This collector set will include all of the 350 cards. So if there's a specific card that you want that you're looking for, you're going to have at least one of every card. From this set alone, you'll have one of every card. Now let's talk about some of the add-ons. So if you don't have any kind of KeyForge and you want some kind of the components, the starter set, and maybe you're pledging a higher pledge that has all these decks, but not a starter set, you still want a starter set, you can get it as an add-on. For $35, you can add on the 2-player KeyForge Winds of Exchange starter set. For $60, you can add on that collector's set that has one of all of the 350 cards. For $10, you can add on a token creature card set. There's 7 different kinds though. So if you want all 7, you're gonna need to spend $70 to add on one of each. If you just want to add on more decks, every additional deck you add of KeyForge Winds of Exchange, $13. For $25, you can add on a playmat, but there's 7 different playmats to choose from. Hopefully you only need one, but if you wanted all 7, it's going to be $25 for each playmat. For $17, you can pledge for a limited edition deck that's only available through this Kickstarter while it's running. It's a deck that has, the cards are printed and it says, "I saved KeyForge." I think the idea here is that they lost the algorithm, they had to stop making KeyForge. This campaign is the way that they're going to bring KeyForge back into existence. So if you pledge this campaign, you are literally helping to save KeyForge and bring it back into the world. So if you want a deck that commemorates that and it's personalized, $17. Then they've also got something that's very interesting to me, which are these kind of narrative adventures you can play either in solo mode or cooperatively. And they've got 2 of them. They're each $25. The first one's called KeyForge Adventures Rise of the Keyraken, and then there's a playmat that is affiliated with that. So for $40, you can pledge the Rise of the Keyraken playmat. And then the second kind of narrative story adventure, it's the same thing. For $25, you can pledge KeyForge Adventures The Abyssal Conspiracy. That is, again, the same as the other one, an adventure that you can play with between 1 and 3 people. And then if you also want the playmat made specifically for that, for $40, you can pledge for the Abyssal Conspiracy playmat. Now, in the continental US, shipping is being estimated at $10, $12, $16, $18, and $24. So the $10 estimated shipping is going to be for either of the first 2 pledge levels. So Seeker of Decks with the 6 decks, or the pledge level below it that has the starter kit. The $12 shipping is the estimate for the Hunter of Shards pledge. That's the one with the 6 decks and the playmat. And then the remaining 3 pledges, the $150, the $420, and the $750, those are the ones that correspond with the $16, the $18, and the $24 in US continental estimated shipping. And finally, Ghost Galaxy is planning on delivering KeyForge Winds of Exchange in January of 2023. For our next campaign, we go back to Kickstarter for a game called Dawn of Ulos. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $60,000. They're currently at $85,000, so they're slowly getting to 1.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Dawn of Ulos is going to complete its funding on Tuesday, September the 27th. This is a game for 1 to 5 players, plays in about 60 to 90 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium light, and we are going to set the risk associated with this campaign at low, mainly because the publisher here, Thunderworks Games, is a really solid publisher and they've delivered lots of games well. So they have a really good track record. Dawn of Ulos is a very light game that mainly features tile placement. So you're going to be building up different areas on this board with different factions. They've got these kind of cool little miniatures. When you get the right shape that you're adding on to an area of the board, the tile, you'll put these faction miniatures on there and they'll start to own that part of the land, and then you can build it up. And essentially when players are playing this game, it's kind of like a stockholding game. So they're trying to get different ownership in the different factions. The better they're doing, the more you want to get ownership in them. But the more powerful they get, the more expensive it becomes to buy an ownership stake in these factions. And then they'll eventually kind of war it out. It reminds me a lot of Small World to some degree, but it is definitely tile placement as the main mechanic. The game's designed by Jason Lentz, It's got art by Diego Sa, who's previously worked on Comic Hunters and Luna Maris, and it's being published by Thunderworks Games, who are known for Cartographer's Heroes, Lock Up a Role-Player Tale, Role Player, and Role Player Adventures. Now this one's pretty simple. There are 2 pledge levels. You can pledge Godling for $59. That's going to get you the game plus a Rift tile pack so that you'll have more terrain that you can use. That's included with both versions of the game. You can buy more Rift tile packs if you want as add-ons. Just know you will get one with already with either version that you pledge. The other pledge is called Deity. It's $84. It's going to get you everything in the previous pledge, but also 59 Metal Favor tokens. Now, for some reason you wanted to instead get those as an add-on, maybe you're getting multiple copies, so you need multiple packages of the 59 Metal Favor tokens. You can add those on for $25. You can also add on additional Rift tile packs for $7. Shipping in the continental US has been estimated at $10 for either pledge, and Thunderworks Games is planning on delivering Dawn of Ulos in July of 2023. We're going to stick around Kickstarter for the next campaign. It's called Wizard Duel, the Magic and Fantasy card game. Now, this one had a minimum required funding goal of $5,000. They're currently at $20,000, which is about 4 times that minimum required funding goal. Wizard Duel is also going to complete its funding on Tuesday, September the 27th. This is a game specifically for 2 players. It takes about 15 to 30 minutes to play. Complexity on the game is light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this game at high. Now, this is a 1v1 card game battler, and it's been designed by a young kid. And I don't normally include things like this just because it's been designed by a kid. Like, I want children to do well in the world, but I don't want to recommend a game unless it actually looks like it's a good game. In this case, I think both things are present. This looks to be a pretty good game, and this kid looks to be an amazing designer. He's already got 4 more games that he wants to produce, and I could easily see him becoming a huge designer of the future. My heart wants this kid to be encouraged. I mean, it's not like some kid that just went out and made a game. He's actually produced it on a very high level. He originally drew the cards himself, played with friends, then he had it printed up professionally. They sold it through a couple of third-party locations. They sold out a couple times. Now he's doing it as a Kickstarter. But it actually looks like a good and well-balanced game, and something that a professional designer would make. So all of that said, I definitely wanted to highlight his campaign because I want to see this kid do well. So take a look at this one, see if it's something that you may like. If you do pledge it, just know, I mean, he has adult help behind him as well, but he is a kid. So if a couple more things go wrong with the campaign or it gets delayed, try to be extra nice because you're dealing with a kid who's a designer, and he's super brilliant from what I've seen in his videos, but you know, he's still a kid. So just wanted to put that out there. All right, so his name is Finn Hand. He's the designer. He's also the artist. Now, I'm not sure how he did the art. I don't know if he used a program for it or if he took art that doesn't have copyright laws, but I know he did create the art in the game in one way or another. Finally, the game is being published by Jeremy Veach. That is just the adult's name, I think, that is on this. So there's no actual, they don't have a publisher. They haven't created a publishing entity. It is an individual that's being listed as the publisher. So there are 3 different pledge levels for this campaign. It's a pretty simple campaign. For $15, you can pledge the Wizard Duel base game. That's just going to get you the base game. However, for $19, you can pledge the full game pledge, and that will add on an upgrade expansion. And that's kind of the recommended pledge level. Now, if you want a pledge that has some quality of life upgrades, then for $39, you can pledge the Wizard Duel Pro Kit. That's going to give you everything discussed previously, plus 4 custom dice, a playmat, and a sticker pack. Shipping in the continental US has been estimated at $6 or $15. So I think either of those 2 lower pledges, the base tier and the full game, those are estimated at $6 in shipping for the continental US, whereas that $39 pledge for the Pro Kit, that is the $15 in estimated shipping for the continental US. Finally, Finn Hand and Jeremy Veach are planning on delivering this campaign in November of 2022. So the game's all done. It's already been produced, which isn't always the case. It's a smaller card game, and they're just waiting now to send out their rewards. So hopefully this will go very well for this kid. I mean, it's already at 4 times funding. I think either way, that's a win. And he'll produce the 4 other games that he has waiting in the wings, and maybe someday he'll become a professional designer. Seems like he already has everything that he needs for that. I'm impressed by this kid, so let's help fund his campaign even more. Next on our list is Merchant's Cove Master Craft. This campaign had a minimum required funding goal of $400,000. They're currently at $473,000, which is almost 12 times that minimum required funding goal. Mastercraft is going to complete its funding on Wednesday, September the 28th. This is a game for 1 to 5 players, plays in about 60 to 90 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium heavy, and although it's just over the line into medium heavy, kind of medium light, medium heavy, but just over the line into medium heavy. And we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium low. Now, this is a new expansion from Merchant's Cove. Merchant's Cove is a game that uses mainly action retrieval and set collection, but it's very variable. So anytime you're playing a different character in Merchant's Cove, you're going to be using a whole different set of mechanics that is specific to that character. It's kind of like Root, but Root is more of a war game designed for heavier gamers. I think there's a cuteness to Root, so that maybe appeals to people who are not only into very dry war games, but Root is still kind of a heavier game. This also has variable player powers with mechanics that are specific to each character, but this is designed more for families and for lighter gamers. So you do have to learn new mechanics each time you're playing a new character, but those mechanics aren't that complicated. Now, this new expansion has 4 new characters that you can play as. It also has 2 more modules that you can add into the game to give it more variability, more things to do. The game's co-designed by Carl Van Ostrand, who's worked on Kapow, the original Merchant's Cove, and Ophidian 2350 CCG, which is a collectible card game. It's also co-designed by Drake Villarreal, and he's worked on the original Merchant's Cove and Spook Manor. Art on the game is by the Miko. A lot of people know him as the Miko. His name is actually Mahalo Dmitrievsky. He is best known for Artisans of the West Kingdom, Imperium Classics, Paladins of the West Kingdom, Raiders of the North Sea, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom. And Mastercraft is being published by Final Frontier Games. They're best known for Coloma, the original Merchant's Cove, and Rise to Nobility. Now, for $69, you can pledge Mastercraft. That's going to give you the new expansion, also a new character that's based on developer Johnny Pack Canton. It's called the Game Maker Merchant, and that is a Kickstarter exclusive that's only available through this campaign. You also get a bonus loot pack that is a Kickstarter exclusive only available through this campaign, and you'll be getting those 2 things in any pledge level that you pledge. That includes the $79 base game pledge if you pledge that, so you'll get the original base game, all the stuff from that, except that you will get those new Kickstarter exclusives, those 2 things. Now, if you pledge the Merchant's Cove bundle, which is $214, you're going to get everything. So you'll get the new expansion, you'll get the base game, you'll get those 2 extras, but you'll also get the stuff that was available previously through the previous campaign, not just the base game, all of the other stuff. That includes the Secret Stash, 3 other merchants that were only available as, each one was an add-on. So there's the Dragon Rancher, the Innkeeper, and the Oracle, and the backer-built Rogue Pack. So that pledge would get you everything that's been made for Merchant's Cove. Now, let's talk about add-ons, because there's ways that you can do different things through add-ons. There is a Mega Box. It's $39. You can only get it as an add-on. And the reason that you might want to get that is if you have the bigger box that they gave, the first time around, it's not going to hold everything. So you're going to need this big box if you want to put everything in one box. It's also going to come with a couple extras. It's going to come with a Thief miniature and a Thief player board. Now, you can add each of those things for $5 as an add-on. But if you get that Mega Box, they're coming free with the Mega Box. Also, you can add on that backer-built Rogue Pack for $5. In the original game, there was a character called the Alchemist. He was one of the 4 characters in the original base game. And he had this little thing that you could construct out of cardboard that would hold his alchemist stuff as a decanter that you'd put his little potions in. They're now offering a plastic version. Maybe some people broke, their cardboard version or kind of fell apart over time. So for $9, you can add on a plastic alchemist decanter. Then you can also get all of the expansions available. If you don't want to go for that big pledge, you just want some of the stuff. For $24, you can add on the secret stash. That gives you like a solo mode and a lot of extra things for variability. Also this character, the thief, that's kind of in the bottom of the box. Now you can get his player board for $5 as a separate thing, but it does come in the secret stash if you get that. Also for $24, you can add on the Dragon Rancher. Also for $24, you can add on the Innkeeper, and also for $24, you can add on the Oracle. Shipping in the continental US is being estimated at $18 and $30, so either of the first two pledge levels that are kind of close in price are estimated at $18, and then that big bundle is $30. Also, if you order additional expansions, through add-ons. So if you're getting a cheaper pledge because you don't want everything, but maybe you want a couple of the additional stuff, for anything that you add on like the Secret Stash, the Dragon Rancher, the Innkeeper, or the Oracle, that will increase your shipping estimate by $5. Not if you pledge the big bundle because it's already being estimated at $30. But if you pledge anything smaller and then add that stuff on, or if you add on more copies for some reason to the bigger bundle, each additional thing that you add on that's a merchant expansion or the secret stash will increase your shipping estimate by $5. And finally, Final Frontier Games is planning on delivering Merchant's Cove Mastercraft in September of 2023. That brings us to Forsaken, which had a minimum required funding goal of $90,000. They're currently at $320,000, which is about 3.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Forsaken is going to complete its funding on Thursday, September the 29th. The game plays 1 to 4 players in about 90 to 120 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at high, again because this is a new publisher. Now, this is being billed as a competitive sandbox adventure game, so it has a bunch of different mechanics. I think if we distill it down to one thing, that's going to be action points. And the publisher on this game is Game Trays Lab. Now, you may be familiar with Game Trays. They're plastic inserts that have been used in increasingly more and more games as a way both to create reservoirs to hold components in while you play the game, and also for storage of various elements of the game. And over the last few years, Game Trays has gotten really common, and they've been using it in more ways and more inventive ways as inserts in games. Really good inserts that hold everything well and hold it in a way that bad inserts tend to not do because they spill everywhere. So Game Trays has kind of proliferated board gaming, and now they are publishing their very first game with Forsaken. The game is designed by Travis R. Chance, who you may know from Heroes Wanted, Legendary Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Path of Light and Shadow, and Michael Mahilsik, who's designed Flotilla, Manchukuo, and Trials of the Temple. There are 5 credited artists right now in Forsaken. One of them, Bryce Cook, is a sculptor. He's worked on Isaribi, Novacry, and Titan Dice. And then the other 4 artists include Andre Garcia, who's worked on Edge of Darkness, Muse, and Run, Fight, or Die. JC Park, Naomi Robinson, who's worked on Fields of Green, Kanban Driver's Edition, and Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, and Paolo Scabeni. And again, the game is being published by Game Trays Lab. It's their first published game and their first Kickstarter. Now, we have 3 different pledges to look at for this campaign. The first is $120. It's called Forsaken, and that will get you the core box. For $179, which is the all-in, you're going to add in 2 expansions, the Shaman and the Stray, and the Prisoner and the Peon. If you pledge the $194 pledge level, which is the all-in plus foreteller, you're going to add in foreteller audio narration for all 3 parts of the game, the core box and those 2 expansions, which you'll also be getting at this level. Now, each of those 2 new expansions is going to have its own story narrative. You'll also have 2 new characters that you can play in other parts of the game as well. And there are additional components that come with each of those expansions, more cards and things. So if you want to buy them separately as add-ons, they're each $25. For $25, you can add on the Shaman and the Stray, And for $25, you can add on the Prisoner and the Peon. Shipping in the continental US has been estimated at $25 and $28. It is $25 for the first pledge and $28 for the last 2 pledges. So the pledge that includes the foreteller narration, you're not getting anything additional physically. So it's the same shipping estimate as the previous all-in pledge, the middle $179 pledge. Finally, Game Trays Lab is planning on delivering Forsaken in December of 2023. From there, we go to Clinic Deluxe Biohazard expansion. This had a very small minimum required funding goal of $3,500, so $3,500. They're already at $37,000, which is 11 times that minimum required funding goal. This project's going to complete its funding on Friday, September the 30th. It's a game for 1 to 4 players, plays in about 60 to 150 minutes. Complexity on the game is heavy, and we're going to set the risk involved with this campaign at medium-low. Now, Clinic is a tile placement game. It also has worker placement in it, depending on how you define worker placement, but it's not listed as a worker placement game at Board Game Geek. It is a very heavy game. It reminds me a lot of various Vital Lacerda games. It also has art by Ian O'Toole, who does all of the Vital Lacerda games, so it looks quite like a Lacerda game. But there is a lot more fiddliness in the design, in my opinion. There's a lot of getting steps and using steps to move doctors and nurses in through the hospital, through various rooms. There's a whole level of the gameplay that feels kind of fiddly. I still like it, but it requires more explanation, and I think there's more just kind of volumes of information to get your head around. Once you do, though, the game doesn't feel quite as complicated to play, but there are a lot of little rules to be aware of, and there are a lot of different phases in the game. So there's a high volume of information involved in the rule books and the teach. But if we're distilling it down to one mechanic, I definitely would say it is tile placement. Now, the newest expansions are designed by Albin Viard. He's designed all of Clinic. The games that he's best known for are Clinic Deluxe Edition, Small City, and Tramways. And Ian O'Toole is continuing art duties on this. He has through the entire Clinic Deluxe Edition, which is good. It all looks of a piece. Ian's probably best known for those Vital Lacerda games, which includes The Gallerist, Kanban EV, Lisboa, On Mars, and Venus Deluxe Edition. And the game is being published by AV Studio Games. That's Albin Viard's company, so they publish everything he designs. That means they're also best known for Clinic Deluxe Edition, Small City, and Tramways. Now, I only really have 3 pledges that I want to talk to you about because I generally do not talk about pledges that just include multiple versions of the game, or group pledges, retailer pledges, also really high-end pledges that are for very specific kinds of vanity rewards that are for less than 100 people. So I don't really talk about pledges unless they have at least 100 copies of the pledge. So some kind of pledge where they're going to personalize something and it's only available for 5 people, I usually won't mention those. I am going to mention one additional pledge here, just because otherwise it's going to be a little bit confusing. So the first pledge that you may want to pledge in this campaign is $19. It's called Biohazard Level 1, and that's just going to get you the new expansion. It's called Biohazard. That will give you an extra mechanic, biohazards, that your janitors will need to deal with. Now, the pledge level that I normally wouldn't cover, I'm just doing it because it's called Biohazard Level 2, and if I leave it out, it's going to get confusing, but that is $38. It's Biohazard Level 2, and that simply includes 2 copies of Biohazard. So if you pledge that level, you're getting 2 copies of that modular expansion. For $39, or Biohazard Level 1, you're going to go back to getting 1 copy of Biohazard, but you're also going to get a copy of the COVID-19 expansion. This is something that I think was offered in the last campaign last minute as an add-on, but it's not part of any of the extensions. So if you haven't purchased this one on its own, you don't have it yet. It's something you may or may not want. I think that's true of Biohazard as well. These 2 things are kind of smaller modular expansions. I don't think you necessarily have to have them, even if you're a completist. And they are going to be these kind of wonky little modular expansions that you throw in, not like a full extension. However, if you really love the game and you have, all of the extensions and you're playing through the campaign mode and you love Clinic, then you probably do want these 2 modular expansions. The final pledge level is for $259, so that is a huge jump, and that is called Biohazard Level 4. That is going to get you the deluxe edition of the game, all 5 of the extensions. So these are expansions that were called extensions. Each of them came packaged in their own box. So you'll be getting all 5 of those and the base game, and of course, the 2 newer modular expansions that are not defined as an extension, the COVID-19 and the new Biohazard expansions. And you'll also be getting a campaign book where you can play through a campaign. Different scenarios give you different extensions to use, so they're kind of mixing and matching the extensions and the components. I think you can ramp them up in difficulty as well. But if you play through this campaign book, which has multiple campaigns that all mix and match various, parts of the extensions, you're going to really get to play this game in many, many, many different permutations and many different variations on the puzzle that is Clinic, and really get to experience the game at its full variability. So I think the campaign book is a really cool thing that is also included at this high level. I don't believe that there are add-ons on this campaign. They're not listed in the campaign itself. It's possible that they may have certain things that are available in the Pledge Manager as an add-on, but I don't know that for sure. We cannot count on that. So it may end up being the case that certain things like that campaign book are only available in that 4th level pledge. However, I wouldn't pledge it just for that if there are a lot of other things you don't want. And I think there are other ways that you can probably find that campaign book. You could probably go to the AV Studio Games website and just order it directly there. If, for instance, let's say you've got most of the other expansions and the base game and you don't feel the need to buy all that stuff again just to get the campaign book. Personally, I'm hoping that it's going to be available as an add-on when they go into the Pledge Manager. We just don't know that it will be for sure. Shipping in the continental US is being estimated at $5, $7, and $39. So it's $5 for Biohazard Level 1, that's 1 copy of Biohazard, $7 for either 2 or 3. 2 is the one with 2 copies of Biohazard, and 3 is the one with 1 copy of Biohazard and 1 copy of COVID-19. And then that final, much larger shipping estimate for $39, that's the estimate for the $259 big bundle that includes everything that's been made for the deluxe edition to date. And that should be it. Albin Viard has said that with this Biohazard expansion, he's finishing his design of Clinic, and he likely will not be returning to it in the future. This will put a cap on it. AV Studio Games is planning on delivering this package in November of 2022, so that's just a couple months' time. From there, we go to the Fox Experimennt, which had a minimum required funding goal of $50,000. It's currently at $329,000, which is about 6.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Now, the Fox Experimennt is also going to complete its funding on Friday, September the 30th. This is a game for 2 to 4 players that plays in about 1 hour. I'm a little bit vague on the complexity, but I think it's medium light. It could veer into the medium heavy category, but I think it's going to stay safely in medium light complexity. And we're setting the risk for this campaign at medium low because Pandasaurus Games is the publisher, and they've done a relatively good job of delivering many, many games over many years. Now, thematically, the Fox Experimennt is about trying to create or block certain genetic traits in animals, specifically for this game in foxes. It's got open drafting and dice rolling, and I think if we're looking at the primary mechanic here, it's probably going to be dice rolling, even though you are doing a lot more than that within the different mechanics of the game. Now, it's co-designed by Jeff Frazier and Elizabeth Hargrave, and Elizabeth Hargrave is best known for Mariposas, Tussie Mussie, and Wingspan. Art on the game is by Joe Shawcross, who's previously worked on Dinosaur World, Plunderbund, and Warband Against the Darkness, and the game is being published by Pandasaurus Games. They're best known for Dinosaur Island, The Mind, Silver and Gold, Tammany Hall, and Yeto. There are 3 different pledges for this. For $55, you can get the retail edition or standard edition of the game. That's going to come with not as nice components. For $60, you can pledge the Kickstarter edition, which is also going to come with a lot of stretch goals, which amount to upgrades, which are things like heat transferred fox meeples instead of sort of generic meeples. The game also has a lot of tokens. So in the standard retail edition, those will just be cardboard. In the Kickstarter edition, those about 200 different tokens will be upgraded to plastic tokens. You'll also have a bunch of dice in 5 different colors that in the Kickstarter edition will be marble dice instead of just regular dice. And there are a few tokens, 4 of them, that will be metal tokens. I believe they're sort of player counters. And again, those will be upgraded from the cardboard tokens in the retail or standard edition. So in the Kickstarter edition, you are just getting much better components across the board. Pretty much all of the components in the game are getting upgraded in one way or another in that Kickstarter edition. If you pledge at the $100 level, which is the all-in, you'll still be getting that Kickstarter edition with all of the upgraded components, but you'll also be getting the 5 to 6 player expansion and a bunch of neoprene mats. That'll include 1 mat for the board and 6 different player mats, because you'll have that 5 to 6 player expansion and you will need 6 player mats. So it's a total of 7 different neoprene mats. You can buy those things separately. Let's say you didn't want both of them. So if you pledge for the 5 to 6 player expansion as an add-on, it's going to be $30. And somehow it's $20 for that package of 7 different neoprene mats, 1 for the main board and 6 player mats. Shipping in the continental US has been estimated at $25 across the board for all 3 of the pledge levels, and Pandasaurus Games is planning on delivering the Fox Experiment in July of 2023. Our penultimate campaign of the video is Quodd Heroes 2nd Edition. This had a minimum required funding goal of $38,000. It's currently at $163,000, which is about 4.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Quodd Heroes is also going to complete its funding on Friday, September the 30th. This is a game for 2 to 6 players, plays in about 40 to 90 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium heavy, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium high. Now, this is a really interesting game. There are these very kind of chunky, cool looking cube miniatures. You're going to be rotating them as you move them, as if they're rolling in one direction or another. And whenever you roll them onto one part of their body, another part of their body is going to be exposed, upwards to the sky. And you'll receive an additional ability for how you roll them and which side of their body is exposed to the sky. So a lot of this game is about moving your character and chaining their abilities together. And I think if we're looking for one specific mechanic that kind of defines this game, it's going to be movement points. Keep in mind, though, that this is a beautiful, lavish game. It's got a lot going on. And when we get to the pledge levels, the highest pledge level features a giant cube storage box. It's much like the Trove chest for Chip Theory games. And I think in general, this game kind of mimics some of Chip Theory games' aesthetics and their production quality. But one thing to know is that the Trove chest that Chip Theory games put out for Too Many Bones was not wood. It was a cardboard constructed box. It was fairly sturdy, but it's not wood. Some people who've been receiving them have even talked about them getting damaged because I think they thought that they were wood. This chest that's going to be offered at the highest level for this campaign actually is a wooden chest. So it's going to be very expensive to produce it and very expensive to ship it. But we'll talk about that when we get to that pledge level. This new edition is designed by Robin Isla, who also designed the first edition, Quodd Heroes. Art on the game is by 3 different artists. Raquel Grisales is one, Ryan Isla himself, who also did art for Cubitos and the original Quodd Heroes, and finally Camilla Sutenberg, who worked on a game called The Arrival. The game is being published by Wonderment Games, that's Ryan Isler's company. They also published the first edition of Quodd Heroes. Now, there are 4 different pledge levels we need to concern ourselves with. The first is for $49. It's a first edition upgrade pack. So this is the pledge that you would want to pledge at if you already have the first edition of the game and you want to get the things and the upgrades that would allow you to transform your first edition into a second edition. For $136, you can pledge Quodd Heroes second edition Deluxe. That's going to get you the new swanky second edition version of Quodd Heroes. For $197, you can pledge the Hero Pledge level. That's going to take that new deluxe edition and add in a couple of things. A 3D Walls and Tokens pack, as well as a Heroic Journey, which is a campaign that you can play in solo or co-op mode. Finally, for $569, you can pledge the Epic Pledge, and that is the pledge level that will include that wooden crate. It's called the Super Epic Wooden Collector's Storage Crate, and it's a very expensive thing to make. That's why that price level jumps up that high. That level will get you the other things that are in the pledge level below it. So you'll still get the deluxe version of the game. You'll get the 3D Walls and Tokens. You'll get a Heroic Journey, but you'll also get this huge, enormous storage crate. Now, as far as add-ons go, for $35, you can add on a Heroic Journey. That is the solo/cooperative campaign mode. For $39, you can add on those 3D Walls and Tokens. For $39, you can add on 11 Painted Hero Minis. I've mentioned before how the characters that you're playing with are essentially minis. They look like a cube. They look like the kind of character you might see in a really cool mobile game or something on PlayStation Network or something like that, where they've been very developed. They've got all kinds of things. They're different pieces. They almost look like a Mr. Potato Head. Or maybe some of those children book characters from the 80s, the Little Miss books. But they're these very cool, colorful cube characters with lots of accoutrements. And I think getting them painted professionally would be really good because they're going to look really cool rolling around this board. Otherwise, you just kind of have a bare mini. For $79, you can add on a deluxe wooden organizer. That is for the regular deluxe second edition of the game. So that organizer is going to fit in to the regular box for the game. This is not something that you would get for the crate, because the crate is going to come with its own organizer inside it, and it's different than that organizer. So they're two different things. So you do not need that deluxe wooden organizer if you happen to also be getting the crate. Finally, the Epic Crate by itself is $399. So if you're just adding that on, that's an almost $400 upcharge. Shipping in the continental US is being estimated at $20, $25, and $45. So that would be $20 for the upgrade pack, $25 for either of those middle two pledges, and then $45 for the big pledge with the crate. However, just know that if you purchase that crate separately as an add-on, it will also have $45 in shipping on it. So you're not going to be saving any money to get that crate separately as an add-on. In fact, you may even end up having to pay more. So I think if you want the crate, just pledge that high pledge level, don't add it on. And finally, Wonderment Games is planning on delivering Quodd Heroes 2nd Edition in September of 2023. That brings us to our final campaign for this video. It is for Sagrada Artisans. They had a minimum required funding goal of $75,000. They're currently at $106,000, which is about 1.5 times that minimum required funding goal. However, keep in mind that this campaign just came out about 2 days before shooting this video, and this is also going to complete its funding on Friday, September the 30th. So they still have most of their campaign to add to those numbers. They've just begun it at the time that I'm shooting this video. Sagrada Artisans is a game for 2 to 4 players, plays in about 45 to 60 minutes. Complexity on the game is light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium-low. If you've played Sagrada before, it is a dice rolling game and a pattern building game. Essentially, you're going to be slotting dice into stained glass windows to make patterns based on goal cards that you have. However, this new version of the game is a legacy campaign. So you're going to be playing Sagrada, but in a legacy game. We're still going to call the central mechanic here pattern building. It's designed by Adrian Adamescu, who's worked on Dice Theme Park, the original Sagrada, and Speakeasy Blues, as well as Daryl Andrews, who's worked on Bossk, City of Gears, and the original Sagrada. The art on the game is by Peter Walken. He's worked on Dead of Winter: A Crossroads game, Dead of Winter: The Long Night, Nexus Ops, Sagrada, and Zia Legends of a Drift System. Finally, the game is being published by Floodgate Games, who are best known for Bosk, Fog of Love, and Sagrada. There are 3 different pertinent pledges for this campaign. For $75, you can pledge Artisans, which will get you this new game. For $130, you can pledge Master Artisan. That'll get you the game, plus a full reset kit, and an additional window booster pack. You're already getting one in with the game, but this way you'll get another one, and I guess when you do the campaign reset, you essentially would have a new one for the new campaign. But these are just additional windows that you can use in the game. Jumping up to $350 is the Cathedral Pledge. That will get you the game and the reset kit and the additional booster pack, but you'll also be getting a custom-made dice tower. And this is not just any dice tower. This is a dice tower that is carved out of curled maple. So it is a wooden dice tower. It's pretty expensive, and that's why that jump from those pledges goes up so high. You can also add it on as an add-on. If you wanted to do that, it's going to be $250 for that deluxe dice tower. For $50, you can add on additional campaign reset kits, and for $15, you can add on additional window pattern booster packs. Shipping in the continental US has been estimated at $20 or $27, so it's $20 for the original pledge, $27 if you're adding on the reset kit. Just know if you add on that dice tower, that's going to add an additional $10 to whatever your shipping already is. And finally, Floodgate Games is planning on delivering Sagrada Artisans in August of 2023. Now that brings us to the end of 16 different campaigns. That's a lot of campaigns in a long video. So thank you very much for spending your time going through all these campaigns, and hopefully there was something in there that either was brought to your attention for the first time or maybe piqued your interest that hadn't before. I will be back in 2 weeks with another video, but next week I will be gone. I'll be out of town, which is why I had 16 campaigns in this video. Before I wrap though, let's talk about some of the other categories here. First up are the 2 games that I pledged from last week's video. Now, if you remember in last week's video, I covered 8 different games, and gosh, there were 5 or 6 games in there that I was really interested in. But you can't pledge for everything. You have to make decisions. So the 2 games that I pledged, the first was Legacy of You. This is the new Garphill Games game. It is a solo game, and it's a campaign. I think it's 7 scenarios, but the campaign is sort of endlessly resettable. So it's not a legacy campaign. You're going to play through it. You're going to make choices, but when you're done, you can start from the beginning and start all over again. And I like Garphill Games in general. I think they make really good, really quality games, and I like their mechanics. I like a lot of their design sensibility, and this one, while it is a solo game, it also has some deck building in it. Now, I'm not always a fan of solo games. I think for the most part, if I'm playing a solo game, I'd almost rather play a video game just because it's more interactive, and I like to play board games to have interaction with other people. I don't play solo games as much. When I do though, as a huge fan of deck building, I think a solo game with deck building as a primary mechanic, a game that's been designed by Garphill Games, I think that's going to be the sweet spot for me. And I like campaigns. So having kind of a story to the game, a campaign that you can play over a series of scenarios, and the ability to replay it, I think this is going to be a real winner for me. The other game that I backed is called Trailblazers because I'm a big fan of that designer, Ryan Courtney. He's designed a very heavy Euro called Pipeline, which I like a lot. I have that as well as the expansion for it, Emerging Markets. I also have his little 2-player game called Curious Cargo, which is one of my favorite 2-player games. It's so good. It's very actually crunchy and complex. It's one of the more complex polyomino games that I've seen, but you're building a network of pipes kind of like you do in Pipeline, and you're exporting some goods, and then you're also importing goods that the player that you're playing against, because it's a 1v1 game, is exporting. So you're sending out your goods, and your opponent's trying to siphon them up, and he's sending out his goods, and you're trying to siphon them up. So you're building networks of pipe on both sides of your player boards, one so that you can export and one so that you can import. And then you're also dealing with these various sizes of trucks that go out and kind of how you place tiles onto those trucks. It's just a great game, one of my favorite two-player games out there, but it is pretty heavy. So with Trailblazers, he's gone ahead and designed a much lighter tile placement game, one that can be played by family members, I think kids, lighter gamers, probably non-gamers, and he's trying to make it very accessible. So there is a travel edition of the game that comes with a carabiner and clamshell, and it has fewer cards in it. They're also created from PVC piping, recycled piping, so they're more sturdy and resilient than linen cards. There's a higher pledge that has those as well, along with the carabiner and clamshell, but the highest version has 350 cards, and it's kind of a combination of the cheaper travel version and the bigger version for home that has a lot more cards in it, but they aren't the PVC, they're just normal cards. So the highest pledge level then kind of combines both elements of that game. It has all of the cards. All the cards are made with that recycled PVC. So they are very sturdy and you can't really ruin them by getting them wet. I think on a production level, that's pretty cool. And it's nice to have a game with cards that hopefully you can play outside and they won't blow away. And also if you spill water on them, they'll be fine. But what's more interesting to me, I think, is the lighter aspect to this game and the fact that it's hopefully going to appeal to lighter gamers and newer gamers. And the game itself, while it's not a story game, there is a story element to it, so that as you're building your trails, there is kind of a narrative element to it, which I think for a lighter game like this is going to be really cool, because as you're kind of building out your tableau of tiles, you're also going to be telling a story. So those were the two games that I personally backed from last week's video. I'm very happy about my choices. I have a bunch of games that I'm looking at from this week's very long 16 campaign video. So if you'd like to see which of these 16 games I personally backed, come back in 2 weeks and I'll be talking about it in my next video. Finally, let's talk about the two games that I've acquired since the last video. The first one is Flamecraft. This is a sort of medium light Euro game. It's sort of set collection. You're operating various buildings in this town, including bakeries, lots of bakeries, and all these businesses have to do with dragons. So the game is largely kind of dragon bakeries. Very cute little dragon. I believe the artist on the game is Sandra Tang, and she has just hit it out of the park with these characters and her artistic style, the way that it combines with the design of the game. And I think it's going to make this game a huge hit over the next couple of years as people see this thing on the table and they see this wonderful, very colorful, inviting, lovely cartoon art. This is a game that wasn't even on Kristen's radar, but as soon as it delivered and I showed her some of the little extras that came with it, like the bookmarks and the coasters and things like that, she immediately fell in love with the art of the dragons, and I think she's even more excited to play this one now than the second game that just arrived, which I backed mainly for her, which is Jurassic World: The Legacy of Isla Nublar. Now, I think most gamers have probably heard about the Dice Tower review and playthrough, and they did not like the game very much at all. They gave it very low scores. I do like Funko Games and Prospero Hall, which is the company behind this one. I do like some of their other games. They make generally very light, family-friendly games, and maybe that's partly where the disconnect was. Maybe this is a legacy game that's designed for families and lighter gamers, and that was something that didn't quite connect with the Dice Tower crew, so that they were coming into it with the expectations that they would have with a heavier legacy game. I'm not sure. We'll see. Kristen really does like Jurassic Park, so I have a feeling we'll be playing this one sooner rather than later. I'll have my own experiences with it, and I'll be able to tell you all what we thought about it. And if it matches the experience that the Dice Tower had, which I hope not, or if we had a better experience and enjoyed it within our two-player campaign that we're going to be playing. Now, 2 weeks is a bit of a ways off. There could be new campaigns that come out between now and then. But in looking forward at what I may be including in that next video 2 weeks from now, I'm currently considering 5 different games, although none of them are locked in. None of them have impressed me that much, but they're all maybes. So the 5 games as of now that may be included in the next video 2 weeks from now includes Atlas Lost, Rise of the New Sorcerers, Mushroom Sorcerer, Pueblo, that one's over on Gamefound, the other 2 are on Kickstarter, and then also on Kickstarter, Spark Riders 3000 and USC Reach. So those 5 games, 4 from Kickstarter, 1 from Gamefound, are right now the short list of games that I'm considering for the next video in 2 weeks, but as I said, none of them are locked in. And I don't know what may also come out in the next 2 weeks that may end up completing its funding during that period for these games, which would be the first week, more or less, of October, I think. That next video in 2 weeks will end up covering the campaigns that are completing funding between October 3rd and October 9th. So all of my videos, well, except for this one because I'm doing 2 weeks, but all of my videos generally cover a Monday through a Sunday. So I'll be back in 2 weeks with a new video. We may be looking at some combination of these 5 games. There may be a couple other ones in there as well. I hope during this next 2 week period that you guys play lots of really cool games. I'm going to be seeing what I can get played with my parents who aren't really gamers, but we are thinking about maybe trying to play The Crew with them. I may also take Dixit, and I'm looking at maybe 1 or 2 other small portable games that won't take up too much luggage space and are also easy to teach, things that I think my parents can pick up fairly quickly, but still feel worthwhile playing. I don't want to take games that are kind of so simple and light that they play themselves and then my parents will have a not great experience. I want to give them some choices to make as gamers, but still things that they can grasp as non-gamers. So thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. I'll be back in 2 weeks with a new Kickstarter weekly, and hopefully that will then put me in the final push to get that upstairs studio completed, new equipment in, and once I do that, then you'll start to see more video types from me again, including new teach and review videos. Then the Patreon will be launching, and eventually the streaming Twitch channel. In the meantime, have a great 2 weeks, play lots of great games, and I'll see you very, very soon. Take care.